So this is Friday Night Photoshop, and tonight we're talking about layers. And layers is perhaps one of the more liberating things you can learn in Photoshop because there's so much you can do with it. There are so many different kinds of layers. And so we first need to understand, what's a layer. When you open up an image for the very first time, it becomes a background layer. So if I just take this image and just simply double click on it, we're in Bridge, and I open it up, you'll notice right over here we've got layers. Now if you don't see layers, all you have to do is hit the F7 key, because F7 turns on and off your ability to see layers. So this is a background layer. And when I talk about a background layer, think of that as being like your basement in your house. You can't go any lower than that. If you want to put something below it, you're going to have to excavate, right? So this is always a background, and we can build upon a background. We can put stuff above it. Just like when we build a house, we can go up easy. You can't go down unless we take this away and we make this a layer that's not a background layer. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So let's first of all talk about what layers are. And one of my favorite ways to illustrate this, and I know a lot of people have seen this, is this sandwich with all these layers over on the side. Now, if you think of this sandwich that you're looking at here as being like an aerial view, so you're going to make a ham and cheese sandwich with tomatoes and mustard and all the fixins, right? And so you make up the sandwich, and then you put it onto a plate, and you put that plate onto your table. Now, if you were to take your camera and exactly hover over and look straight down over that sandwich, I think we can all agree that that's what we see here in the middle of the screen. It's like a shot from above. We're looking down on the sandwich, okay? But now, if I could rotate that sandwich around and look at it from a side view, we would have what you see over here under layers, where on the bottom is the background, because that's what the table surface is, if you will. Then on top of that, we have a plate, and then we put bread on the bottom of the plate. I stacked up some ham on that bread. I put some tomatoes in. Then I put a lot of cheese in, okay? And then I put some mustard, and then I put the bread on the top, because most sandwiches you have bread on top and bottom, right? So that's what this is on the side. So let's look at this again. We're looking at the aerial view here, where we're looking straight down on it. And this one over here, we've just come around to the side, and we're looking at the sandwich from the bread top to the bread bottom and everything that's in the middle. These are layers. Now, layers are hierarchical. If there's one thing I need you to remember, is whatever goes on top is going to be what you see first over here in this aerial view. So right here we see the bread top. Now I can turn on and off these layers so that you don't see them just by clicking on this little eyeball that's here. So if I click on this little eyeball, now I'm no longer seeing that, but look at this, I can see the mustard that I put on. Now if I put this layer back on, if you had that sandwich with the mustard and the cheese and everything there, if you put that bread on top, does that mean that everything underneath it goes away? No, it's all there. But from your aerial perspective that you're looking at here, you don't see it. This is perhaps the single most common mistake that I see people make. They'll call me and they'll say, Mike, I got all these layers, but I can't see them. Okay, whatever's on the top layer is going to block or obfuscate whatever is under it. Okay? And here's proof. If I take this top layer and shut this off, now we can see all of the mustard. And if I shut the mustard layer off, there's the cheese. And I could go through this layer by layer. There are the tomatoes. And I can actually go and take these all the way down. There's the bread on the bottom. I didn't put any mayo in there. I should have. There's the plate, and the plate is on the table. and I've got this neat tablecloth. Okay. Now, I could just put the bread on the table. You see, I'm turning on this bread bottom, and I've got the background on. Or I can make a mess here. I'll put the mustard on the table. Okay. Or I could put just this top piece of bread on the table, and I could put the bottom piece of bread on the table, and now I've just got an empty sandwich. But we really should have that on a plate. See where we're going here? This is how simple it is. What we're doing is we're putting these layers together so that we can see everything together. Now, as I mentioned, layers are hierarchical. Remember what I said, whatever's on top is what you're going to see first over here in this aerial view. If I take this layer of mustard and simply click on and hold it and drag it up top, now look at what you're seeing in that aerial view. It's like I put the mustard on top of the sandwich. We wouldn't do that, but this illustrates the fact that the mustard is on top in this list and it's on top over here. Any questions on that? I mean, this is basic layers. Should I move something else? I'll put the tomatoes. I'll put the tomatoes up on top. Okay? I can move anything I want to wherever I want. I could take this bread and put this up on top. And so now what I've got is the bread. Under that I've got the tomatoes and then the mustard. See, I can reorder things. And there's places and ways and reasons why you'd want to do that. But the most important thing you need to understand is how layers work. And understanding this hierarchical order of whatever's on top is what you see over here up front, knowing that this is an aerial view and this over here is a side view. One other thing I'd like to talk about layers is, what if we didn't see anything? See this checkerboard? This is absolutely clear. I could actually go and say, let's add a layer. And now we're looking at this layer. And this layer is absolutely clear. Think of a picture frame that you've taken the glass out of and it doesn't have a backing. You can stick your hand right through it. That's how clear, when you see this checkerboard, that's how clear this is. Because I could stack up 100 of these, and if I had something in the background, you see I can turn this layer on and off, and you'll see no difference. If I put the background on, if I turn this empty layer on and off, again, it's like looking through a picture frame that doesn't even have glass. There's no difference at all. And in this layer, I could add something if I were wanting to. I could add another piece of ham. I could add cheese. I could add whatever. I could add text. We'll get into that in a moment. But the most important thing here, the takeaway is, just remember that layers are hierarchical, and these little eyeballs will turn on and off layers. So if you're wondering, like, okay, why isn't there any mustard here? Yeah, there's mustard there. You have to shut this off, and you'll notice that there's the mustard. It's right on that layer. And just because it's being blocked doesn't mean it's not there. So let's move on, and let's see what we can do with this. So I'm going to create a canvas. So I'm going to go to File, go to New, and I'm going to just do, let's see here. What size would be a good one to work on? 1920 by 1080. That'll work. We'll say OK. And I'm going to have a white background, 300 dpi. That's fine. And we'll say Create. So this is like a canvas. If you're to go and get an artboard and you're going to take paint and brush on it, that's basically what this is. This is the canvas. This is a background layer. Now let's go find some pictures I'd like to put onto this. So I'm going to come over here and I need to go find some pictures. So maybe this one would be nice. Nubble light. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up. Now, by the way, you'll notice up top here, we've got my background, and then right next to it, I've got this other tab that is the picture of the lighthouse. Now, what I want to do is I'd like to put this lighthouse onto this. So the easiest way to do that is if I undock this, and I'll do this again, if I simply click and hold and pull this down. So now I've just pulled this down. It's no longer docked up top there. I'm going to move it out of the way. And I'm going to take this background layer and physically drag it right over here to that canvas. And I'm going to close this first one. And I'm noticing this is really big. So this is where I'm going to just go do a quick free transform. Yeah, that's really big. And I'm going to bring this down. There we go. So there, I've just put this image onto the canvas. And I can move it wherever I want to put it. I can put it right here in the center if I were so inclined. But in this case, I'm just going to stick it up here in the corner. And I'm happy with that. And I check this little checkbox to say, okay, plant it there. Now you'll notice, here's the background, but now I've got a layer. And if I turn this eyeball on and off, you'll notice that comes and goes. Let's do it again so you can see how it got there. Let's take another image. So I'm going to take this one of the truck. Now I've got this image I'd like to add to that other one. And to do that, I'm just going to simply take and drag this down, get it out of the way, and then take this background and throw it over here on the canvas. And I'll just get rid of this one. I don't need that anymore. And if I right click, I can say the free transform, and I can make this whatever size I want. So maybe I stick that in here. Maybe I go and try and make it the same size. And let's go do this one more time now. So let's say I'd like to take this picture of these lights, and I'm going to go ahead and open this. By the way, to change the size of this, if I didn't want to squeeze it down, I could just do this image size and put in 300, and then I want the pixels. We'll make it 1080. We'll say OK. Now, I'm just going to take and drag this down like I did before, drag this over, throw it there anywhere like I did before, close this, and now I could use the move tool to move this over, but look at what's happening here. Now, remember how I said layers are hierarchical? What happened to those two other pictures? They're really there. They really are. They're under this one. And if we look at this one is on top. And if I shut this eyeball off, they're the other two. I get this question every year. Somebody will say, I got all these pictures up there, but I can't see them. And I always say, what's on the topmost layer? And I'll say, go shut that off. And then all of a sudden, there's silence on the other end of the phone. So I'm going to right click here, do free transform, and then I'm going to bring this down, and maybe I'm going to stick this down here. So what I've just done now is I've taken the picture of these trees and I've just put them into this canvas, and that's the third layer. Again, remember, I can turn on and off these layers, and you'll notice that the pictures come and go. Now, if I wanted to move all of these, I could choose all of these layers just by clicking on the top one and shift clicking on the bottom one. And you see how these all go gray? Now I can come over here and just take this move tool, and I can move this around and stick this wherever I'd like to put it, and then just come back out. So now I've just found a way to put 3 images up onto the screen. Now remember what I said about layers being hierarchical. This image that's on the bottom is actually the one on the top, and I can prove that by turning on and off this eyeball. Watch what happens if I take this top image and move it around the screen. You'll notice that it goes over the truck and it goes over the lighthouse. But if I were to take the lighthouse layer and move it to the top, look at what happens. Now the lighthouse layer is over this one. I could take the trucks, which is this one, the truck, and move that up top. And you see how these are now on top of this. It's all a matter of clicking on the layer that you want to work with, grab the move tool, and now we can move that you say, okay, why don't I see it? Why isn't that going over the truck? It's because the truck is on a layer above the lighthouse. Just like if I move this down, this is over the other one. Again, remember what I said at the outset. Layers are hierarchical, and that's why it's really important to understand what's on top is going to be what's on top over here. Even though in this case, it doesn't look like anything's on top, but realistically, this is on top. I've just shown you how to take different images and make like a simple photo montage to put them all together. And let's just see what some things are that we could do with this. For instance, here's an image that I did a while back where I just took some pictures of buoys, threw them up. I put a text layer underneath, and let's talk about that here in a moment. And then I did some fancy, you'll notice the stroke. This is one of the things that you can do with layers. Now, I'm going to take this composition and let's see if we can make something else out of this. So I'm going to take that picture of the truck, and maybe I'd like to have that over here. Maybe I'd like to take the lighthouse, stick it there, and take this, stick it down here. There we go. And then for the background, I got this kind of a gray color, but I think it'd be nice if I could come up with like a blue, maybe like a blue like that. And I'll just go grab the paint bucket tool, and I'm just going to click on this. This is the background layer. So now I've got these three images that I've put up here. Now, I could take any one of these layers and put some attributes to these, such as down here with effects. And if I come down here and say, let's put a stroke on this one, for instance, well, I'd like the stroke to be on the inside. You notice how the edges go sharp? Because if you put it on the outside, they're going to be rounded. So we're going to want to go on the inside. And maybe I'll make that stroke really small. And maybe I'd like that to be a little bit brighter. I could make it pure white if I wanted, but I kind of like to have that a little bit lower. I'll say, okay, wouldn't it be cool if I could put that same stroke on the other two images? So if I come up here, and you'll notice that I've got the effects and stroke. If I shut the effects eyeball off, the stroke goes away. But if I turn it back on, there's the effects. And the effects I'm using is stroke. If I simply right-click over here, you'll see I could say copy this layer style. And now I could choose this layer, and I could go Control-click and choose this layer. And now if I right-click, I can say paste the layer style, and watch what happens. Now because this picture of the truck is over the lighthouse, that's why this stroke cuts into the lighthouse. And because the lighthouse image is over the trees down here that are lit up, that's why that's cut in. If I were to take this lighthouse layer and move it to the top, you'll notice that that now cuts into the truck and the bottom. Now let's talk just a little about a text layer. What if I wanted to write something here? So this is where I'm going to go. And by the way, when you click on your text, if you don't see the samples looking this big on your screen, what you want to do is go over here to the type and then come down here to font preview size and choose either extra large or huge. By default, it comes, I think, small. Choose one of these two. And this way, you can actually see what the text is going to look like. So let's see if we can pick some font that's going to look nice to say Season's Greetings. So maybe if we were to say Cooper Black, and I'm going to need to pick a color, and I'm just going to go with gray, and I'm going to write right here, And this gives me a sample of what this is going to look like. That's fine. Hopefully I don't misspell, like I said. Now here's another little trick. I'd like to have this fill this space a little bit better. How many point do I need to make that happen? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but if I wipe over all of that to select it, watch what happens to the cursor when I go up here to the type tool. Does everybody see that? It turns to a scrubby. We all know what scrubbies are, right? That's where you left click and hold your mouse and then move your mouse left and right, and it will automatically fill in this value. I don't care about this value. I care about how this fills in down here. So I'm looking down here. I'm not looking at that number. And I just made that bigger. And I'm going to move this over. And I know I need to make that smaller now. And I'm going to stick that right in here. And who knew I needed 28 points? I didn't. But there. Now I'd like to maybe put down here, maybe I'll put the date, about 2020. Or I could say optimistically 2021, right? 2020. And same thing, I'm going to wipe over this, and then I'm just going to go ahead and move this out and stick this down here and say, okay. So there, real simple greeting card. I don't think it's going to win any awards, but the point is you could see what you can do with layers. Let's just move this up just a little bit. There we go. So let's say that we're done with this design. How are we going to save this so that we can go back and re-edit this? Because maybe we'd like to do this again for next year, but have this say 2021. Well, if I were to flatten this, and that is an option, when you go up here to layer, if we say flatten the image, this is going to take all these layers, and it's like baking a cake. It's going to put them all together, and you're going to have just one file. That's great for the internet. That's great for sending off to a printer. But it's pretty bad for you because you do not want to do that. You want to save this as a Photoshop file. And here's why. I'm going to go say save as, and I'm going to choose the top one here, which is Photoshop, and I'm going to give this a title, FNPS 12 2020. And I'm saving this with layers on. That's really important. And now I need to say, where am I going to save this? So I'm going to put this on the K drive. This is the thing. Don't ever let this assume where it wants to go. So this is where you have to choose where it goes. And I want to put this into my layers folder. And I'm going to say save. There we go. So I've just saved this. And I'm going to close this. Oh, what if I wanted that to say something instead of 2020? What if I wanted that to be a different color down the corner? Well, if I go up here to File, and in this case I can just say, well, let's just open the recent file. When I open this, I get all the layers back. And now I can go in here and edit just this one line and say, let's make this a little more of a reddish. And gee, I can just click up here by going to the type tool and click on this, and it automatically finds that for me. And maybe I'll go in here and say, that'd be nice if that had a hint of green. Okay, done. Because I saved it as layers, I have the full ability to go in and re-edit this. I could even go back in here and say, well, I think that 2020 is kind of big. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. And there it is. So for saving a document that's got multiple layers, what you do is you go to File and then Save As, and then you want to choose as the type, the top one here, Photoshop. It's a .psd file. JPEG is going to flatten the file for you. So you really want to choose Photoshop. And that way, when you hit save, it's already asking me because I've already got that. So when I do the save, that's going to save all the layers over here. And now I'll have the full ability to go and do editing. Now, what if I wanted to send this off to have it printed at Walmart? Well, I could take this file and then come over here and say save as, but in this case, I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And I'll say, okay, save. And image quality at 10 is okay. So I'll say, okay. Now, watch what happens. When I come over here and look at this, I've got this file that's the JPEG, and I've got this file that's the PSD. The JPEG file is only 341K. The Photoshop file is much bigger, 1.37 meg. It'll still fit on a floppy disk. But here's the difference. If I open up this JPEG, you'll notice I only have the background. I cannot edit anything in here. I can't change the order. This is as good as baking a cake. And it's hard to unbake the cake. To have to go in here and try and like rechange the colors or make this say 2021, you'd have to go match the background color. It would just be a nightmare. So always save it as a Photoshop file, because when I come here and open up this Photoshop file, you'll notice it looks identical, but now I've got the ability to work on the different layers. And by the way, did you notice the text came in on two separate layers? So here's just for 2020. Well, let's say if I were doing this for next year, well, I could just go ahead and edit this and just take out the 0 and put in a 1. Now I'm ahead of the game for my greeting card. And then I could just go ahead and save that. So that's why layers are really important to save. Next, what I want to talk about is layer masks. And so I'm going to open up a couple of pictures that I've got of some vehicles. I've got this one going in one direction, I've got that one going in another direction. So what I want to do is I'd like to open up both of these. And the quickest way to get images onto layers is by opening them up in Bridge. So here I've just chosen these two images, and now if I go up here to Tools and go to Photoshop, one of the options is load the files into Photoshop layers. This is just going to do it for you. So now when I bring this up, here's one, and there's the other. Now who can tell me why we don't see the other image? It's there. It's because this one is on top. And if I shut that eyeball off, there's the other one. So what I want to do here is I need to align these two layers. Because you notice how that wall in the background jumps and the foreground moves? So what I need to do first thing is I want to align these so that they're both in perfect alignment. So if I choose both layers just simply by clicking on the top one and the bottom one, and if I go over to edit, I can go in here and use auto align layers. Very much like the same thing that we do when we do focus stacking. Same thing. So we're going to say OK. And this is going to go and align these two layers so that when I turn this on and off, you'll notice that wall barely moves. Now you do notice that we've got some background here on the bottom. Well, that's just because we had to move one to get it to perfectly align. But that's fine. That doesn't bother me. But I would like to have both of these vehicles in the picture. Now, I could do a blend, and that's where I take the opacity of this top layer and I could fade it down, but now it looks like I've got two ghost vehicles there, and that's not going to work. And if I fade this all the way down, you'll notice there's one, and then as I fade this up, here comes the other one. So if I had these as photographs, And if I were to perfectly align the two photographs, and then what if I had scissors or a knife, and then what if I could cut a hole out of the top one? Well, if you cut the hole out of the top one, through the hole, you'd see the picture that's in the background. So we can do this electronically. And that's by using this mask function down here, a layer mask. Sometimes it's called vector mask. Now what this is going to allow us to do is to paint on a very specialized canvas that will be like cutting a hole. This canvas is white, so everything that's white is going to conceal what's underneath. But if I were to go and pick up a paintbrush, and let's make that brush a little bigger, using the bracket key to make that a little bigger, and I'm going to go paint with the color black, which is what I want. And if I paint on the mask, you'll notice how I can click over here, and this is the picture. And if I were to paint here, that's not so great, right? So I don't want to paint on there. I need to paint over here on the mask. And watch what happens when I paint black over there. All right. Now, if I show you the mask, this would be like taking that top picture and taking the scissors and cutting a hole. Just cutting a hole out just like that. And then putting it over so that you could see one through the other. Now, if I shut the layer off on the bottom, you can see that hole. That is the hole in the top one. And remember, whenever we see this checkerboard, that means it's fully transparent. So whatever is in the background is going to be seen right through. That's how you can composite and bring other images into an image. So here's some boats. What if I were to make a mask? So what's a mask all about? Maybe what I'd do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say new, and I'm going to make this, I could make this like an 8 by 10, but I need this to be a landscape. Okay, 8 by 10. We're going to create this. There we go. Now what I need to do is, this is a background, but I want to be able to put something under it. The way to do that is if I simply double click on this background and then say OK, that's now layer 0. So that means I can put stuff underneath it. So I need to cut a hole in this. And what I'm going to do is come here and I'm going to say a fixed ratio, and it's going to be a 3:2 aspect ratio. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw a box like this. And how I move this around, by the way, I'm holding the left click key down and the space bar, and this enables me to move it. So right there is where I'd like this box to be. Because I've made a selection, all I have to do now is hit delete. Now, remember what we said, this is transparent. Think of this as being like a mat. You know when you buy a picture frame and there's a mat in it? So this image is, this whole image, this canvas, we'll just go show you, is 8 by 10. 8 inches by 10 inches. So if you were to go and buy an 8 by 10 frame, this will absolutely fit into that. Now, we've got this picture of the boats. So what we need to do is to simply undock this and then throw this over here and close the boats. But we need the boats to be below the mat. You know, if you think of it in a picture frame, you put the picture behind the mat. So we're going to put this behind the mat. Now I'm going to go and resize this. Right click, free transform. And let's see what we can do to move this around. See, I could come in here and get all of it if I wanted, or this is my opportunity to maybe zoom in just a little bit, because I think I like filling the frame a little bit better. There we go. And now what I might do is take the text of the center, and maybe I will put in some text down here. Yeah. Okay, anybody know what I did wrong there? I have this on a layer underneath that. I need to put this up top so that you can see what I wrote. So what I need to do here is do that. And maybe I would like to say Portland, Maine. If there's any librarians or English majors here, you're probably cringing. Okay. And I think I want that to be capitalized too. Maybe I don't want it that big, so this is where I just use scrubbies. And just stick this up here and say, okay. Now, because this is a mask, I could go and open up any other shot that I might want and take and drop that in just like this. And so long as it's underneath, and this won't be the fishing fleet anymore, and if I shut that off, and we shut that off, you see what I've just done here is I've just put this image now in here. So here is my mat, and here I am swapping images in that mat. So let's say you had a collection of images that you might want to put up on the wall and have them all to have a certain look to them. You could create your own template. You could choose whichever font you want. And then you could go ahead and take this and save it, and then shut the eyeball off and go and save that one. And you could take and print all of those and have a collection that all have a uniformity to them that might look really nice for an art opening or an art show. Maybe you might want to make up a specialty line of postcards or trading cards or something like that. That's how you could go ahead and create something like this. What do we think about that?
Amazing. But I would have to do it many times over again for it to be even remotely automatic.
Now, you've seen those picture frames probably that have multiple openings where you can put in family members and things like that. You could create one. If we just said new, and let's say if we were to go with something a little bigger, say like a 16 by 20, and we'll say create. Now, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hit this little plus button, because what I want to do now is come in here and draw some boxes with a fixed aspect ratio, just like this. And I'm going to take this and fill this with black. Now, I would like to duplicate that. If I simply go Control J, this is the quickest way to make a copy of a layer. So if I go and do something like that, and I'm going to go do another Control J, and I'm going to stick this one out here. Now maybe what I'll do is I'll take all three of these and just line them up. Now what I'm going to do is take all three and duplicate them. So if I do another Control J, I can now take all of those and move them down. If I do another Control J, I can again move all of them down. Now I've just quickly created a template here. Now I'm going to collapse all of these because, I don't need to have them all separate. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up and say layer merge visible, or merge layers, excuse me. So that's going to merge just all of them together. So now I've simply got this template. Now that I've got a template that I want to use, what I can now do is use the magic wand tool and then come in here and click inside one box and then hit shift and click inside all of the other boxes. Now that I've got a selection, if I shut this off and go down to this layer, layer 0, if I hit the delete key, what that's now doing is giving me this, what looks like a window frame almost, of the background with all these holes that I can now fill with images. Now, all I have to do here is go and open up some images that would make sense to put in there. So if I open up this image and just drag it down, throw it in, close this. Now we need to make sure that this is below that. And now I am going to go right click, free transform, and make this fit in a box. Just like that. Next, what I would do would be to go grab another image. And for this, I need to just find some images. So I believe I've got a folder called images. And let's take a shot of a lighthouse, shall we? This is not going to make any sense at all, but that's okay. Drag it over. Right click, free transform. And we'll stick it in here. You get the idea. Should we do another? Let's just take another image that, gee, what if we had a horizontal image that we might want to stick in there? We can do that. So we'll just take this down. We'll throw this over and say OK. And we will do the free transform. But this time we got to grow this and stick this. So we'd like to see the sun in there with that wave splash. Now it's okay if it's stepping into the other frame there, because all I'm going to do is take this part of the frame right like this and hit delete. And you can see what I've done. All I'm doing is I'm positioning these pictures and then I'm just laying this mat right over them. It's not too dissimilar to those picture frames that you see that have all the openings. And then what you do is you just simply throw your pictures behind. But typically the problem is your pictures don't always fit. Well, the nice thing about this is you can get them to exactly fit. Now I could continue with this, and then once this is done, I'd be saving it as layers, but then I would save it all as a flattened piece, and I'd send that out to make the print. And so by doing that, you don't want to send somebody images with a whole bunch of layers, because typically they're not going to know what to do with it. And the other thing that happens is, what's to say that they don't just take the top layer and work with it? And that wouldn't be good. So what we need to be able to do is just as you bake a cake, when you take it to somebody, you don't bring the ingredients over. Well, that's what we're doing. You're going to create the cake and then you're going to bake it and put it all together. And that's what you bring is the baked cake. I must have some buoys.
And then
There
once
we
you got
go.
them once you have them all in there, you can put borders around them and drop shadow and stuff.
Um, you've got some limited capabilities with that when you are doing the this kind of a thing, just because I'll show you what happens. Okay, so if I were to take this layer and you can see what we've done there. If I come down here and say, let's put a stroke around all of this, this is where I think we might have to go to the outside. No, let's go back to the inside. Oh, and it would help if I had a layer color that you could see a little better. There we go. So this is where it's important that we have to do the outside. And you see, I'm doing it to all of them. And we'll say, okay. And so there's the stroke to all of them. All I need is 3 more images and I'll be done with this. So you can see what I've done here. This is very much like putting up a bunch of images like that and then laying a mat over them to make it look a little cleaner. And the cool thing about the mat is, we could change the color of the mat. If we don't want the mat to be white, we could do, how about like a gray mat? Or we could make it a color. If we didn't want gray, maybe we'd like to have some, we could make it blue. I don't think I like that though. but I kind of like this light gray. So we'll just stick this in here. And because it's a layer, I can go in here and do the Control L for levels and make this whatever shade I want. So it doesn't have to be pure white. It could just be an off-white, like that. So I'm going to go save this, and naturally I'm going to save this as layers. So this is going to be a 9 box 9-box template, and I'm saving this in Friday Night Photoshop and in layers. And we'll say OK. So there's the piece, and you just saw me assemble this from scratch. And by the way, I'm keeping this black as a template because I could use this later if I want. So, but I'll just shut the eyeball off, and then I'll just go do a save. And then if I were wanting to share this with somebody, well, I could go ahead and do save it as a JPEG, and then I could put this up on Facebook, social media, send it off, make a poster, whatever. And because each of these images are on a separate layer, it's not hard for me to be able to come in here and say, these buoys, if I right click, this is layer 6. So if I go to layer 6, and then if I were to come in here and do a Control L, look at what I can do to that one layer. I can lighten that up a little bit. This layer over here, if I right click, that's layer 4. It automatically jumps me to 4. I'll do a Control L, and I'm just taking levels and saying, well, let's just lighten this up a little bit, maybe make the darks a little darker. There we go. So I can just do some minor tweaks right on it. And because these are all copies, I'm not erasing the original. That's the other good thing about this. So if I ever wanted to, if I didn't want that shot to be there at all, I could just go get another shot and drop it in there. That's the real beauty again of this. And in this case, maybe I am going to come in here and say free transform. Now here's a trick. If I hold the shift key down, I can squeeze this in to get more of that to fit. And in this case, I want to have more of that wave and the sun. And can you see that that's squeezed? Maybe not. You can get away with that. And we'll save that. So I know I've done a lot in layers. We started with that sandwich talking about what layers are, and then we talked about why they're important, and the question came up, well, how many layers do you know that you need? Well, the image you're looking at right now has got, what, 11 layers? 9 of which are images. The 10th one is the matte, if you wanted to call it that. And then then I've got one that's just the template, which doesn't have to be there. Years ago, when memory was a premium, to go and do like a Control J, you'll notice that if I use this little tab down here to see the document size, so this is an 8 meg image. If I do a Control J, well, that's now a 16 meg image because you see I've got a layer. So layers do increase incrementally the size of the photo. Now, 12 years ago, to have 16 gigs of RAM in your computer was about a $2,000 undertaking. So at best, you may have only had 4 gigs of RAM. In fact, if you had Windows XP or any 32-bit operating system, you could only use 3 gigs of RAM. Nowadays, we don't think twice about buying a computer that's got 8, 10, 8, 12, 16, 32, 64 if you're so fortunate. There was a way that you could do adjustments and preserve a lot of RAM and space. And that's by using this little tool here, which is a adjustment layer. Now, if I come in here and choose levels, this is the same thing as doing Control L. However, this is on an adjustment layer, and watch this. I can go ahead and lighten this up a little bit, darken things. I can do all the things that I can do in levels, but my image size is still only 8 megs. And by the way, this is non-destructive. And because this is on top of this layer, you'll notice I can turn that on and off. And I can save this as a Photoshop file that I can then go and edit later and come back in here and say, well, gee, maybe I'd like to make that a little bit darker. Now you might say, well, Mike, why don't you just do that in Adobe Camera Raw? Well, good point. You absolutely can do that. So what if you had some video that you might want to possibly alter? So let me open this up. Now I know that Photoshop, we think of it as just being still photos in that, which is fine. But did you know that you can bring a video clip into Photoshop? So when you open a video into Photoshop, this is what you get. And if I hit the space bar, this is going to play the video. Now, this video looks a little bit dark. So what I need to do here is to lighten this. So if I come down here and choose this adjustment layer and then go to levels, I can then go and lighten this up. And gee, I could even, if I were so inclined, grab this middle button and go out here and try a white balance on these birds to make that look a little bit better. But you see what I've just done? I have just gone in here and I've just adjusted that video. And now when I play it, I've just adjusted this. So maybe you didn't have the ability to capture something with enough light, but after the fact, there it is. I got it. So I was able to lighten this. And because it's on an adjustment layer, I can turn that on and off. You can see where I started and where I'm ending. So if I wanted to put this into a slideshow or burn it to a disk or do something more with it, this is where I would say export, and then I'd choose render video. And this should know what file format it came up with. H.264, that's fine. I'm just going to put the letter F for fixed, and I'm going to say, go ahead and render that for me. Thank you very much. And now this is going to go through frame by frame and apply those adjustments to the video. And this is how you can use layers to help your video to look better. So that wraps up layers for this week, and we will certainly do some review again in the future. Thanks for joining me for layers.